You'd smell them before you saw them. Smoke in the hair, old blood under the nails, sweat that never washed out, soaked into skin that hadn't touched water in weeks. Walk into a shelter 30,000 years ago, and the smell would hit you like a wall, a thick, living fog of bodies, smoke, animal fat, and rot. And the people sitting inside it wouldn't even notice. They'd look up at you, calm, breathing it in like air, and then they'd catch your scent and recoil, because to them, you'd be the strange one. Out here, the way you smelled wasn't an accident, and it wasn't rudeness. It was a record. Every person in that shelter was wearing the last month of their life on their skin, and everyone around them could read it. This is why ancient humans smelled the way they did. And by the end, you'll understand why your own nose would have stopped warning you within days. Start with the thing you'd reach for first and couldn't have. There was no soap. None. Not for most of the time humans have existed. The oldest soap recipes we've ever found were scratched onto clay tablets in Mesopotamia, and they're only about 4,500 years old. And even those were mostly for cleaning wool and treating wounds, not for washing yourself. For the 200,000 years before that, there was nothing. No bar, no bottle, no lather. Just you, your skin, the dirt, and whatever you could find. So the grime didn't come off. It built up, layer after layer, day after day, until it became a second skin you wore for life. And here's the part people never think about. You couldn't just jump in a river to fix it. In a lot of the world, for a lot of the year, washing could kill you. Picture it. It's deep winter. You're cold to the bone and running on almost no food. The water is freezing. If you strip down and scrub in a river in that cold, you don't come out clean. You come out hypothermic. Wet skin in cold air pulls the heat out of your body shockingly fast, and there's no hot shower to climb into afterward, no dry towel, no heated room. There's a small fire that can't even keep your fingers warm. So a bath wasn't refreshing. It was a gamble with your life, and most days you didn't take it. You stayed dirty and warm and alive. People did wash when they safely could. A warm river in summer, a lake, steam and smoke to drive off the worst of it. But for huge stretches of the year, getting clean was simply more dangerous than staying filthy. Now add the clothes, because the clothes kept you alive, and the clothes were crawling. We actually know almost exactly when humans started wearing them, and it's one of the strangest clues in all of science. There's a kind of louse that only lives in clothing, not in your hair, in the fabric, in the seams. It cannot survive without something to wear. So by tracing the DNA of that clothing louse, scientists worked out when it split off from the head louse. And the answer was around 170,000 years ago. That's the moment, give or take, that humans started covering their bodies. And from that day on, the lice came with us. They lived in the seams of your hide and your furs. They laid their eggs in the folds. They bit you every single night while you slept. And you couldn't just wash them out, because washing the clothes meant they'd freeze stiff, or fall apart, or leave you naked in the cold while they dried. So you didn't. You scratched, you smelled, and you carried a colony of insects on your body for your entire life. And so did everyone you knew. The smell of unwashed hide, old sweat, and the things living in it wasn't disgusting to them. It was just the smell of being a person. And those lice weren't only itchy, they were dangerous. Body lice carry disease. They've spread sicknesses that have killed people by the millions throughout history. So that smell, the smell of an unwashed body and unwashed clothes, was also quietly the smell of something that could make a whole shelter sick. You just didn't have a name for it yet. Then there's the body itself, working against you. Your skin is covered in two kinds of sweat glands. One kind just makes water to cool you down. But the other kind, packed into your armpits, your groin, your scalp, makes a thicker, oilier sweat. And on its own, that sweat doesn't even smell. The smell comes from the bacteria that live on your skin and feed on it. Give those bacteria a warm, damp, unwashed body for weeks on end, and they multiply into the millions. And the smell becomes something you could lean on. Now stop washing for months. Stop changing your clothes ever. Add the body hair, holding all of it close to the skin. That's not a person who forgot to shower. That's a fully matured human smell, the kind almost no one alive today has ever actually encountered. And it wasn't just sweat. It was the mouth. There were no toothbrushes, no floss, no dentists. ancient hunter-gatherers actually had fewer holes in their teeth than we do because they weren't eating sugar, but their teeth wore down hard from gritty food, and gum disease and abscesses show up again and again in ancient skulls. An abscess is an infection in the mouth, and infection has a smell. So a lot of people walked around with the constant Swedish reek of slow decay coming from behind their teeth, and no way on earth to stop it. It was the feet, wrapped in damp hide. It was wounds. With no clean bandages and no medicine, a small cut could turn into an infection, and an infected wound gives off a smell so specific that healers for thousands of years learned to recognize it. A sweet, rotten warning that the body was losing a fight. So your own body could start to smell like danger, and that smell might be the first sign anyone got that you were dying. And then there's your hair. All of it. Long, matted, never cut with anything sharper than a flint edge, greased with animal fat to fight the wind and the cold, and rarely if ever truly washed. Hair is one of the best smell traps the body owns. It soaks up smoke and grease and sweat and holds them for weeks like a sponge you can never wring out. It was also prime real estate for the lice, who laid their eggs along the strands where they were warm and safe. So your head wasn't just dirty, it was a living, smelling thing you carried around on your shoulders, announcing you to every nose in the shelter long before you ever opened your mouth. And remember, you were never the only body in that space. A shelter held a whole group, the very young, the very old, the sick, the injured, the new mothers. And every single one of them was adding their own layer to the air. The smell of a baby. The smell of an old wound that never fully healed. The smell of sickness, of fear, of someone who hadn't been able to move in days. To us, that sounds unbearable. To them, it was a map. You could step into that shelter in total darkness and know, by smell alone, who was there, who was sick, who had given birth, who had been out hunting, and who had stayed by the fire. The thick air wasn't just stink. It was the whole group, written in a language only the nose could read. Now step back from the body and look at the whole world they lived inside, because it was soaked in smell too. Everything happened around fire. Fire for warmth, fire for cooking, fire for safety through the night, which means smoke got into everything, into your hair, your skin, your furs, the walls of your shelter. You wouldn't even smell it after a while. It was just the smell of home, baked into you so deep that other people could tell which fire you belonged to. Then there was the work. To turn a dead animal's skin into something you could wear, you scraped it and soaked it and worked animal fat and even brains into the hide to soften it, and then smoked it for days to keep it from rotting. It worked, and it meant the very thing keeping you warm smelled of smoke and grease and old animal. The fat you rubbed into your skin and hair to fight the cold and the wind went rancid. The food you stored, drying meat, fermenting whatever you could, filled the air, and the shelter itself had no drains, no toilets, no way to carry waste far away, often with animals living close by or even inside. There was no clean air to compare anything to. There was only the thick, layered, lived-in smell of survival, and you were standing right in the middle of it, breathing it, becoming it. It also shifted with the seasons like everything else. In the warm months, when a lake or a slow river was safe, people did get cleaner. They swam, they scrubbed with sand and ash, they rinsed off the worst of it, and for a few weeks they smelled of skin and water and sun. But then the cold came back, and the furs went on, and the fire never went out, and the whole layered smell sealed itself back in for the winter. And there was a strange logic hiding in the grime, too. A coating of dirt, fat, and smoke on bare skin is a small shield against wind, against cold, against biting insects. Being filthy wasn't only neglect, sometimes it was insulation. The dirt was doing a job. But here's where it turns, because it would be a mistake to think all of this was just gross. That smell was a tool. It was one of the most important senses you owned. Long before anyone could shout a warning across a valley, the nose already knew. You could smell smoke from a fire you couldn't see and know that other people were near. You could smell rot and know that meat had turned before it could kill you. You could smell rain coming and the musk of an animal that had passed through and the particular scent of a predator close enough to matter. And you could read people. A mother knew her own newborn by smell in total darkness. That's not a sweet idea. That's a documented, hardwired thing your body still does. You could smell sickness on someone before they looked sick. You could smell fear. The way another person smelled told you, without a single word, whether they were healthy, whether they were kin, whether you should trust them or run. In a world with no writing and no labels, smell was information pouring off of every living thing all the time. And the people who survived weren't the cleanest. There was no clean. They were the ones whose noses and whose bodies learned to live inside the stink and use it. And here's something that might surprise you. Humans aren't accidentally smelly. We're built for it. Tucked into your armpits and a few other places are special scent glands that most animals your size don't have nearly so many of. Glands that switch on at puberty and pump out exactly the kind of oily sweat that bacteria turn into a personal, unmistakable smell. That's not a design flaw. For most of human history, that smell did a job. It carried information about who you were, how healthy you were, even who you might be a good match to raise children with. Your body quietly broadcasting it and other bodies quietly reading it, all without a single word. We spend a fortune today scrubbing that signal off and spraying a different one on. Ancient humans simply wore theirs, full strength, all the time. The thing we treat as something to hide, they lived inside as a basic fact of being alive. So if everyone smelled this strong, why didn't it drive them insane? Why weren't they gagging all day? And the answer is a quiet trick your own nose plays on you right now. It's called olfactory adaptation, and it works like this. Give your nose the same smell for long enough, and it simply stops reporting it to your brain. The signal's still arriving. Your brain just decides it's not news anymore and turns the volume down to nothing. It's why you can't smell your own home when you walk in, but a visitor can. It's why you stop noticing perfume on your own skin within minutes. Now imagine that turned all the way up. Everyone around you smells the same way you do. The whole world smells like this every day. From the day you're born, your nose would calibrate the entire background of human stink down to neutral, to nothing. And you would walk through it completely unbothered. Drop yourself today into that shelter, and within a week, you'd smell exactly like them. Smoke, sweat, grease, and all. And worse, you wouldn't even know it. The stench would fade for you, not because it was gone, but because your own brain had quietly stopped telling you about it. You'd be filthy, crawling, and totally convinced you were fine. And yet, humans being humans, they still tried. Not because anyone had a word like hygiene, but because some smells were just unbearable. And because smelling good has always been tangled up with status and attraction and feeling human. So across the whole world, people reached for the same handful of fixes again and again. They rubbed crushed aromatic herbs and flowers on their skin. They chewed fragrant leaves and roots to cover the smell of their mouths. They smoked themselves and their clothes over sweet-smelling wood to drive off the worst of it. They burned resins and pine and gums, and that habit, that need to fill the air with something better, is the distant ancestor of every incense and every perfume that exists today. They greased their hair and skin with fats scented by whatever they could find. None of it made them smell the way you smell after a shower. Nothing could. But it tells you something important. The urge to not smell like that is almost as old as the smell itself. There's one more thing that smell did, and it might be the most human of all. It told you who your people were. Every group, every family, every band living around the same fires, eating the same food, sleeping in the same furs, slowly came to share a smell. A blended signature of their particular smoke, their particular hides, their particular bodies. You grew up inside it. It was the smell of your mother, your brothers and sisters, your whole world, and to you, it meant safety. And the flip side of that was sharp and immediate. A stranger smelled wrong. Different smoke, different food, a different body. In a world where an unknown person could mean a threat, that wrongness in the air was an alarm that fired before you'd even seen their face. So the stink wasn't only something you endured, it was belonging. It was home. It was the difference between us and them, carried on the wind. And if you, today, could stand in the doorway of that shelter for just 1 minute, it would overwhelm you. Your modern nose, raised on soap and clean laundry and open air, has never once been asked to handle anything like it. The smoke, the bodies, the grease, the rot, the animal, all at the same time, thick enough to taste. You'd gag. You might not be able to stay, but give it a few days and the strangest thing would happen. It would fade. Not because anyone cleaned a single thing, but because your own brain would give up and stop reporting it. The shelter wouldn't change, you would. And by the end of 1 week, you'd be sitting at that same fire, breathing that same air, no longer smelling a thing, every bit as nose-blind as the people who had lived there their whole lives. Your body still remembers all of it. You flinch from the smell of rot because for 100,000 years that smell meant death. A certain wood smoke still drops your shoulders and feels like safety, even if you've never lived near a fire in your life. You're drawn to some people and put off by others before they've said a single word, and you can't explain why. That's not manners. and it's not magic. That's 170,000 years of reading the air to stay alive, still running quietly under your skin. The ancient humans weren't disgusting. They were soaked in the only world they had, reading it with a sense we've half forgotten. And if you had lived back then, you would have done the same.